Good afternoon and welcome to the Monday, May 4th, 2009 informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. And I'll bring this meeting to order. And the first order of business will be a City Council staff report. And we'll have updates from Deborah A. Owen, City Clerk.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. A couple of reminders from your memo this week is that the zoo meeting for the Breakfast Club, it will be May 20th. That's that third week in May, Wednesday at the zoo. We're serving a breakfast there, and then following the presentation from the zoo will be a brief tour. You can go and look at the new facilities. Also, in the memo there was talk about the policy committee meetings of the Municipal League, and some of the council members serve on some of those policy committee meetings, and some have not. They're open slots, so if you're interested, please just let me know, and we can contact Yvonne and get you plugged in. And then finally, I met with leadership. We talked about our 2010 proposed budget. I have some preliminary numbers, just so you know. It was a feeling that the elections budget, which is not an annual expense but a one-time cost, would be kind of kept out of the annual one-time cost figures and discussed. So really overall the budget is down 3.6%, and then the council's division is up 1.1 at this point. Clerks is down 7.5. That is in great part because there's a purchase for a document imaging system that we didn't need to purchase this year, so that's why that number is down. And then also the internal audit is down 0.5%. Thank you.
Questions of Ms. Owen? Very good. I see Mayor Munson's here, but I presume that you're going to be speaking later, Mayor? Very good. Audit Committee. Audit Committee? No report. Fiscal Committee.
We will be meeting right after this afternoon's informational meeting.
Do you have content of that meeting?
I do, but I forgot, and I don't have my agenda. Here it is. We're going to review the health fee changes, and that'll be a presentation by the Public Health Director and Public Health Manager.
Very good. Thank you, Joe. Land Use Committee.
Land use, we had two informational pieces last week. One from Mark Cotter on the maximum daily load limits of contaminants in the Sioux River. We were updated on that progress, that study, as well as an update from planning on the Shape Sioux Falls report and study. I think most of the council was there for that meeting. It was quite long. But if there's any other questions, I guess I could try to answer them.
Questions of Councilor Jamison? Very good. Okay, Public Services Committee.
No update.
No updates. Okay, number 8 is our City Council open discussion. Anything for the good of the order? Councilor Knudsen.
I just wanted to remind you all that you should have received an email mid-afternoon from the Director of Finance regarding a question I had this morning on item number 32, because I was rather confused. It's a transit issue, and it's over $2 million, anyway, no capital transfers will take place for this transaction, as the projects must be amended into the program via the resolution on May 11th. But anyway, I was confused as I was reviewing my agenda over the weekend, and I asked the Director of Finance for a clarification, and he provided me a very full one, and I won't take the time to read it to you, but you all have a copy of it. So will you just know that I think there might be a little confusion on that issue at our end.
Questions of D? Very good. Anything else? Councilor Jamison.
I don't want to stick my nose in somebody else's business, but oh well. The Minnehaha County is going to be making their decision tomorrow on the fair, funding their fair. And I just thought we'd bring it up as a discussion about, I think the city benefits from having that fair here. I don't think we contribute much to keeping it. I just thought I'd throw that out to see if you guys had any other discussions or comments about that. I think it's a good partnership if we should create one or what, but I just hate to see it go away. And I'm just kind of throwing that out there. Councilor
Knudsen.
Well, Councilor Jamison, I think it's always fine to have good, healthy discussions on any topic. I am a great supporter of the Sioux Empire Fair and plan to attend again this year. But as a city councilor, I don't feel like that I should try to influence any of the county commissioners' votes on this very important topic. And so I don't see that as our responsibility in any way, but I do hope that everything will go well for the fair this year and in the future.
I would like to add that the city does do traffic control out there. I've seen them there year after year, so we do make a small contribution in that regard, I would say. Anything else?
Yeah, just to follow up on what you're saying, Councilman Litz, is we, when they ask us, last year we went out and did asphalt, we helped them with some public work projects if they ask for that, so we've tried to give them in-kind help.
Very good. Anything else? I'd like to remind this body that the forum, the public forum tomorrow between 5 and 6:30, we're trying to encourage public participation. I see a number of folks in the audience here tonight that will probably be there as well tomorrow. Jameson has dug up a sponsor for some food out there, so if we can entice you with that, that's always a good thing. Mr. Staggers, I reckon that you'll be there then. Very good, very good. Okay, we're going to go with our presentations now, and the first one is a Quality of Life 2 bond presentation. Gene Rowenhorst, our Director of Finance, is going to lead that off. And Gene, will you please introduce everybody that's going to speak as they come along, or would you like me to do that? Very good. Thank you, Gene.
How's that? Better? We're going to, we want to start out with Mark Cotter to give us an update on where we're at with the Corps of Engineers. And so we'll let Mark do that, and then we'll actually get into the changes that we're talking about and the quality of life, too. So if it's all right with you, Mr. Chairman, we'll have Mr. Cotter come forward and
Very good.
do his part.
Is that microphone working back there? And if not, should we have people speak up even louder? Or
Testing. Is that on?
no?
Is there a volume? Is it on? Sounds like it's on.
It's on.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. And I will just take about 3 slides here to provide an update on the flood control project. The original project that identified the $38 million bond that was brought forward, and we appreciate your support with the ceiling of $38 million with project costs. As we've tracked through and started to phase the project, we can share with you the initial need and the initial issuances that are needed. But to recap, Phase 2 and Phase 2 Dam, that is the area down between that's remaining from 49th Street up to Skunk Creek, and it's also Skunk Creek back to the tiebacks west of Marion Road. Those are the dollars that are provided for that. The next $12 million was the planning level estimate for the 41st Street Bridge, the operational projects that will go along with the detour, as well as an incentive to complete the project ahead of schedule. Phase 3 levees is essentially the diversion channel, which is to provide additional lift on those levees. Will not be to the extent of the lift that will be done in Phase 2. And then, as always, when you're early in the process, to provide for unforeseen costs and contingencies, brought us to $38 million. Next slide. Since recently we were informed of what the fiscal 9 federal appropriation will be, we did a look back to 2000 to provide what the annual appropriations have been procured by the delegation, and they've ranged as low as just over $1 million and as high as $3.5 million. This in federal 9, just under $3 million was provided for this project since 2009. Since 2000. Okay, and now to give you a breakdown of what we believe the 2 bonds need to be this summer. There's 2 bonds identified. The first is to allow us to advance funds to the Corps for Phase 2 for the levee, and I will just step you through that. The construction of the Phase 2 levees the dam, a contingency, and then we've subtracted off the dollars that the Corps already had, as well as what they procured for the Federal 9 appropriation. So it provides for Phase 2 of $11.468 million. The 41st Street bond, and I will step you through those line items. There is remaining lands to be procured for that project, which we have an estimate there of $1.2 million. There are operational projects like right turn lanes, like surfacing improvements that we've identified at those intersections at 49th and Western, 49th and Louise, 57th and Marion Road, and the surfacing condition on Louise from 49th to 41st. That would be work that's done this summer to enhance the traffic operations as we start to reroute a significant amount of the traffic that uses 41st Street during the staged construction of the 41st Street Bridge. The bridge, which is estimated at $11.045 million, provides for the design, the construction administration, the construction, and the incentive of that total. We have a 15% contingency on these dollars since we're just in the beginning phases of design. And then less cash on hand that you see each month in the financial statement of $1.7 million provides for $13.518 million needed for the 41st Street bond. And so the combination of those two is just under $25 million. Going forward, the balance of why that is less than $38 million is that Phase 3, we need to execute some project documents before Phase 3 can go forward, so we're not bringing that bond forward at this point. And Phase 2 is the area that's most impacted by the FEMA floodplain maps, and that's the impetus to get that work done. And so these two areas between the levees, the dam, and the 41st Street Bridge, along with the operational projects, are critical timing-wise to get started. Is there any questions?
Questions of Mr. Cotter. Mr. Staggers.
Yeah, Mark. You know, on the bridge, we've always talked about the bridge being $12 million, and now we have the 13.5. What's the major reason why we have an additional 1.5 million?
Well, with the remaining land for the levee project, Councilor Staggers, that 1.2 could go into the Phase 2 bond, or it could go into the 41st Street bond. For today's purposes, I put it down into 41st Street bond because the city is responsible for the land. But at the end of the project, there will be essentially a true-up, and our respective share for the project will be identified at that point. So that 1.2 could essentially go in either bond, but I've just, for today's purposes and going forward, now that some of the variables are becoming more reality, I've just moved it down into this one. So that's one of the primary reasons we've gone from 12 up to 13.5.
Also, if I could just ask one other quick question here about the Phase 3. Now, when you start to Phase 3, you're not going to have any further authorization from the City Council. Is that correct?
Not with the current estimates for the levy raising, we will not. And if we can go back to that slide, Ann. Phase 3 was and still is projected at $8.8 million, and a part of the unforeseen costs and contingencies would be related to Phase 3, and that's the difference between when you start out at $38 million. Now we know Federal 9 appropriation is in hand, and so that reduces the $38 million by $3 million, so down to 35, and then essentially between the 8.8 and a portion of the 2.6 will reduce you from $35 million down to about $25 million today.
And also, I guess I just thought of another question. We're going to have one bond issue for the bridge, then we'll have one for Phase 2, then we'll have another one for Phase 3. Now, with doing a lot of different bond issues, this is probably adding some costs instead of just doing one or two?
there shouldn't be any real cost of any significant amount, because what we'll do is actually issue the bonds in series. And so there could be three series out there three different series that will actually issue, all under this one bond ordinance.
Councilor Benega?
Mark, can you remind us what Phase 3's timetable is?
Well, Phase 3's timetable, our goal was to originally let it in 10 and complete it in 11, and we still may be on that same schedule. One of the things that we've been managing with or without the expected ARCA funds that we were hoping to procure is that initially there was some requirements. If you were able to obligate funds early enough, you wouldn't have to, there's a ceiling that this project is set at. Well, we also can't go beyond that ceiling until we get that project ceiling amended. So that is one of the first steps that we have to do before we can let Phase 3. And so between now and by the end of the Federal 10 legislative budget is where we hope to insert the language that raises this project, because it has not been raised since 1996, up to the ceiling that will allow for the Phase 3 construction. And so likely there is, we'll be able to accomplish that by 2011, the end of 2011, but our hope is to complete Phase 2 and then immediately start working with FEMA to update the FEMA maps.
Councilor Benega?
I guess my question is obvious, is, we somewhat were led to believe that we were going to get Phase 2 support, and obviously, is that going to give us any concern about Phase 3 support from the funding sources?
No, I think if we go back to this time last year when the mayor and several staff went out to meet with the headquarters, it was always our intention, once we started to see the pattern, and the graph was provided of $1 to $3.5 million by annual appropriations, to actually accelerate the process. Now that with the new FEMA maps coming into place, we put together a bond that would actually advance the federal funds. Only for a short window of probably December through last week, we had looked that there was another potential track of funding from the federal government. But all along, and I think that was the plan too, that you have supported us, and we appreciate that, with just to actually advance this project, get it done. Phase 2 improvements really help control the Skunk Creek high river flows, and so that completing that amount will allow us to go back to FEMA and say, let's update this FEMA map. But as far as Phase 3, we've also, once we now accelerate Phase 2, it will, there's quite a bit of things at play, but that will also increase the cost-benefit ratio of this project, which will hopefully then rise it on the Corps of Engineers list and get Phase 3 funded. So there is, as we'll manage every year, there's a chance that Federal 10's appropriation will be significant to pay for Phase 3. And so there's several things at play.
But there's no guarantee that we're going to get those federal funds, correct?
There's no guarantee, but there is, I think, a reasonable pattern to say that if the average is approximately $2 million, when we met with the Corps, they did say they're committed. It's obviously a very good project. They've executed the design, and that I think it's a reasonable assumption that we'll be able to procure $1.5 to $2.5 million every year for this project.
Can you find somebody to give that to you in writing?
No.
Councilor Costello?
Mark, the right-of-way acquisition that needs to be completed, there's none related to the bridge itself, is there? And it's primarily due to the levee system?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Jamison?
Mark, when is the soonest we could start moving dirt?
Well, there's 3 key points that will occur in the next probably 5 months. very soon, we'll bring, once we review it, there's the legal document between the City of Sioux Falls and the Omaha District Office. It's called the Project Coordination Agreement. That has to be updated, of which we just received the Corps of Engineers comments last Friday. That has to be updated. That allows the city to advance federal funds, because that language is not in there, and it will be. And then we will bring that forward to the city council. That will provide authorization for the mayor to sign the amendment to the project coordination. So that's step one. And then the end is when the bid date is set, which would be reasonably as late as, say, third week in September. And then a point in the middle will be when we work with Gene and PFM to actually procure the funds, wire transfer them to the U.S. Treasury. They recognize the funds and then go through the bidding. So between finalizing the project coordination agreement, procuring the funds, and letting the project is reasonably now between today and September, about the third week in September. The Corps of Engineers has about a 30-day process to award contracts, and then there'll probably be another 2 weeks after that. So the limiting factor is our short construction season in South Dakota, that we may only use about 2 months of the construction season this year. But it will also set us up for a very aggressive 2010.
Will that delay the 41st Street Bridge at all?
No, we still intend on moving forward. We just initiated design. We're going to initiate a public outreach campaign very soon with the hope of bidding 41st Street in October and starting in March of 2010.
Councilor Knudsen.
Director Cotter, I just think we can't wait much longer to get our flood control problem solved. We've talked about this for a long time, and I know it's very expensive. And I realize that our congressional delegation has done a wonderful job working with the city and lobbying really hard for that federal stimulus money, and so I'm really appreciative of all three of their efforts. But I guess I was wondering, would there be anything the City Council could do or should do to encourage FEMA to seriously consider delaying the implementation of their map? Because to me it still is a federal, a typical federal unfunded mandate. I mean, again, public safety is really important for our citizens, but I don't want all of our citizens, all those thousands of citizens, to have to buy that flood insurance when, in fact, we are really disappointed that we didn't get that federal money. Mm-hmm. So is there anything we should do as city councilors on this topic?
Well, I think we can ask again, but the current schedule is that we bring those maps forward for enactment in September, and so there is a window of time here between the City Council and the Mayor's office that we can. I think one of the key steps would be is once we let a project, or even once the solicitations for bids goes out, that shows again, I think, the commitment from the city and the Corps of Engineers to bring this area up to protection level. That they may review that, but I think that I wouldn't want to speak for them, but we'll certainly do what we can.
Councilor Staggers.
Yes, Mark, in regard to the maps, my understanding was they were supposed to have those maps out in March or April, but now it's been extended to September. In other words, I guess the point I'm trying to make, is there any way we can just drag this out a little bit longer, these maps?
Well, there's respective periods of time, and I'll let Mike Cooper weigh in on that.
Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. We have been working with FEMA, as you know, for many, many months on this process, and we were led to believe earlier in the year that there would be an official notification that the 6-month window would begin. And when we finally did get that notice, now that 6-month window extends over, as Mark said, into September. So based on what we have been told by FEMA at this point is that we will be required to adopt the new flood maps in September of this year.
And also, what if we decided not to adopt those maps? What would happen?
What if, then I think we would be in violation of FEMA's regulations, but Again, that's, I haven't asked that question myself, so I don't know if I should give you a specific answer today, but we'll continue to have meetings with them and talk about the timeline.
Gene?
Okay. Today we're here to answer questions per the request of the council a week ago, I guess it was, 2 weeks ago, to go over the quality of life bond 2. We're going to discuss each one of the projects independently. We've got very short presentations. I don't think there's more than six slides per presentation of the different projects and what they are and who's involved and what kind of benefit they would bring to Sioux Falls. And we're going to start out with the West Side Library, and Sally Felix will be doing that. And when Sally gets done, then we'll go to the Youth Sports Complex, and Don Kearney will be taking that one. And helping him out will be Elizabeth Whaley from the zoo, because the zoo is an important part of the transactions that we're talking about today. And then we will talk about the River Greenway and its improvements. That's the ones over by Sharapa Place in that area. And lastly, we will have Jessica Cameron here. She's with us here to talk today about the actual issuance of the bonds, and we will explain at that point how we're going to pay for all this. And so with that, and at the end, then I'll get up and finish off kind of put an end on the thing, and you should feel free to ask questions. And normally the council does feel free to ask questions, but please do so while we're going along through it, and we'll see how it goes. So with that, Sally.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I do want to just briefly review for you the West Side Branch Library project, which, as Gene said, and you all know, is part of the Quality of Life 2 bond. I'll talk just a little bit about the need for it, and then what we're going to do, and then the timeline and the cost. As one of my board members said, I think when he spoke with you back last year at budget time, library development, or libraries follow development. We're not out in front like the fire stations and the parks, but we come along after there's enough people in a given area of our community to warrant public library service. And we certainly, I think, are probably beyond that point when we consider the west side of Sioux Falls. There are, the planning department says that by 2015 we're going to have about 55,000 people living west of I-29. That's almost the size of Rapid City. Rapid City has a main library and a branch in their city. We have seen enormous use at the Cayley Branch Library, and I know it's not news to you because I've been talking about it probably as long as I've been here almost. We did and you know Cayley is near the mall, so it's a case of location, and it's a case of where our location is really maxing out pretty quickly. We did do a sampling of library users and where they live and which libraries they use, and I'll show you a map in just a minute. We've done this several times. We did one in March, and we found that 48% of the items that were checked out at the Cayley Branch Library were checked out by people who lived west of I-29. Cayley's use has been going up. I think at one statistic I saw just before I came over here that's not in here, it's gone up 34% just in terms of the items that people borrow. That's not attending programs, it's not using computers or doing anything else folks do when they're in the library. But it's gone up about 34% over the last 5 years. The end of last year, when we compared actually all of our library use, but particularly at Cayley and Oakview, when we were looking at last November, December, and comparing that to those same months the year before, we saw at both Cayley and Oakview a 31% increase in use. Holds are if you want a particular book or DVD that's not in at the time and you put in a request for it, we put you on a list for it, and then when your turn comes up, we let you know that it's there. It's a very, very important part of what we do. It's a very, our customers love it, and we frequently find that we have over 900 items waiting on those hold shelves at the Cayley Library. It's the smallest square footage of our branches, 12,500 square feet. Both Ronning and Oakview are about 15,000. And there really is no place to expand on that site. We were very fortunate, and we appreciate the funds last year to replace the parking lot, and that certainly made customers a lot happier, but we didn't add any space to that, again, because we're pretty much landlocked out there. Dan?
Questions or comments for Sally?
Oh,
Were you done, Sally?
No.
I'm sorry.
No. I can be if you want me to be. Okay.
If I may, Sally,
sure.
The 900 items on the holds is one indication, but what are the users experiencing in those conditions in terms of space needs and things like that? Is it...
Well, it's frequently pretty crowded at Cayley, particularly. We do have significant demand on our programs out there for children. When we do a puppet show out there, it's pretty typical that we have 600 or so people that want to attend. And we already do 3 shows, and sometimes the staff sneaks in an extra one. We have, I don't have the visual with me, but I have a great visual from last summer where we had one of our staff members doing traffic control. She actually had an orange vest on out there in the parking lot. If you're familiar at all with Cayley, you know we share that area with some apartments and some businesses, and the businesses get quite upset when our customers park, in their spaces, which is certainly understandable. So we've really had, significant difficulties, when it comes to that. Now, it's not like that every day. I mean, I'll admit, but it is very, very crowded. We have a lot of computer use out there. And people, frequently have to wait for that. We only can put in so many book stacks, and we've made some changes out there and rearranged. And of course, in 2002, the addition opened. Thank goodness. So that has allowed us to, to try to keep up with the demand. We've allocated as much staff as we can out there and not have the other locations really suffer, in terms of hours open and the service we provide. I promise I'll go quicker here. Just to show you, and I apologize, I know it certainly is not clear, and if you're colorblind, I'll ask your apologies on that as well, or give you my apologies on that. You can see that long north to south line is Interstate 29. All of those blue dots on this map represent people who use the Cayley Branch Library during that period in March that I just referred to a little bit ago. The blue dot, the smaller blue dot to the right of I-29 is the location of the Cayley branch, and the larger red dot to the left is where our proposed location is for the West Side Branch Library, which is at Memorial Park. And again, that's something that, we've been talking about for a number of years. And also, I will say that all those blue dots represent about 1,000 households. Okay, we are looking at a neighborhood branch library following upon our model of service that we have in the City of Sioux Falls, about the same size as Ronning and Oakview. I mentioned at Memorial Park. Our branch is focused on providing popular materials for adults and children and teens. Children's programs are one of our primary missions at the branch libraries, and of course computer access is another. You can see here, you ask about crowding, Councilman Brown. This is a good example. The slide or the photo there to the right at the top is one of our programs from last summer at Cayley. And this just gives you a sense of the activity levels within there. And we do see this as a service commitment to the people living in western Sioux Falls. And timeline, our design, we're expecting to start in 2010, start construction in 2011, go through part of 2012, and open in the summer of 2012. You can see the costs there. There is one cost update from what you may have seen previously, and that was that we did do just kind of inflationary cost updates in construction and did add $200,000 to the total that you had seen before. Now, I am finished, sir.
Very good. Questions to Sally? Mr. Brown?
Would the design of this be the architecture similar to Oakview then?
Well, I think what we'll do is, it's a different piece of property. So, of course, that often drives, what you can do and how much space you have and so forth, and how the building needs to relate to what is around it. So I think we're pretty open in terms of what the design might be. We certainly will be getting the neighborhood involved, more than likely have a public design charrette process that we had at Oakview and had at Main Library. So we found that to work particularly well, especially at Oakview. There it was one big piece of ground that could have gone a whole bunch of different ways. But we're open about design.
And then is there room to expand that should we need to someday?
That I can't tell you. I don't know about, in terms of the piece of property, how much it would allow us to do that. Certainly one thing we can consider, which is, what we've done with the addition at the main library, is to build it so it could go up if that were warranted in the future. And I certainly think we'd look at that.
Anybody else? Very good. Thank you, Sally.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. Don Kearney with Parks and Rec. I wanted to brief you on the youth sports complex that we're proposing to go on the northeast corner of Westport and Benson. The primary tenant would be South Dakota Junior Football, and our plan would be to construct 12 new multi-purpose athletic fields with the idea that we would start out with 8 that would actually be irrigated, the others would just be graded and seeded, and then the irrigation installed as warrant demands. The other thing I'd also point out is that, these additional teams, one of the biggest reason why we're doing this project is we've been turning teams away for about 10 years now. And obviously the fields build that capacity to add not only the teams that have been asking to play, but also accommodate future growth of that program. It's really a similar situation to what we've had out at Sherman Park, where we've not been able to add additional teams at Sherman Park. We were capped at 100 for over a decade or so, and with the opening of Harmadon this year, we've been able to add the 35 new teams in the first year that it opened, with the capacity to again add more teams there. One of the other things I wanted to point out is that it really does leverage $4.5 million in private funding and in-kind improvements, and it really matches the city's dollars, dollar for dollar, whether it be in kind or in cash or in land in the case of Sanford's land. And then South Dakota Junior Football with the lights and the buildings that they would propose to install out there to accommodate that program. And just as a reminder, our junior football portion of this complex is $4.2 million. The other thing I'd mention is that the sanitary sewer line that is proposed to go in out there is programmed in our 5-year CIP for 2009. And then it would not only serve the junior football complex, but it would serve that entire commercial development as well. Just also would point out that our initial plan was to sell these bonds earlier this year so we could start construction this year as well. Based on where we're at now, we're probably looking at design and then probably pushing back the time frame in which we could actually start play out there from 2011 to 2012. And so I just think that's the time frame that we're on with the current status of proposing to sell these bonds. The other thing is, obviously in the red, you'll note that we've carved out 8 of the 12 fields that we had to plan to initially develop parking on that west side, and realize that this is still a concept plan at this point. This is kind of a work in progress that we've been working with South Dakota Junior Football and Sanford on. But know that those additional fields could be irrigated and put into use, as well as additional lighting and additional parking, as the need for additional teams to be able to play out there materializes. So we'll just mention that we have folks from Sanford and junior football And while we're not funding a hockey arena, there is a hockey arena proposed as part of this overall site plan, and we do have representatives from youth hockey here as well. So we'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions of Don? Councilor Knudsen?
I think Councilor Costello.
Councilor Costello?
Don, did you say that the actual construction of this won't begin until 2011, design in 2010?
Actually, we would start design this year.
Okay.
And then as soon as, you could turn dirt next spring, we'd be out there moving dirt.
Okay. So
We're also talking about some grading as well. We're going to try to balance the dirt on the entire site because it's got some significant topography there. That northeast corner needs to come down, and we'd like to do that grading before the sewer line's installed so that it's at the proper depths. And so there may be some work that starts yet this fall, but it's kind of up in the air yet right now. But we would like to get the sewer line in, though, but again, that makes the grading a necessity, too. And so ideal, I guess to back up, my point is that if we can start in 2009, it'd be great. At a minimum, we would get the design done so we could start construction first thing in 2010.
Councilor Knudsen?
Director Kearney, is it, my question really follows Councilor Costello's pretty closely, is I'm not a very patient person, and I wish we could play junior football there next year, not 2012. I mean, if we've been turning away teams for 10 years, it's like, oh, wow, let's go.
Councilor Costello and then Councilor Staggs.
Don, do we, and I guess maybe it's more directed for Gene, do we have a timeline on when we're going to sell these bonds?
I defer to Gene.
Okay.
We're probably on a 60 to 90-day window at the shortest to actually get the bonds sold. Can I answer your question?
So 60 to 90 days after they're authorized?
By the time we get everything done with them, and this doesn't become effective if it passes until about the second week in June, and then we'd have 60 days there to really get the thing done and all issued.
So I'm just trying to figure out realistically what the time frame when we're really going to be able to start on these things.
You're going to be able to what?
When we'll really be able to start on them.
June, July, probably start on the bonds or
Start on any of the construction projects.
Oh, that can start, depend what you're doing. You'd have to wait until the thing is effective, the end of May, the first part of June. And then that's when you could start something, but if it's the kind of thing we have to have the money in place, you're going to have to hold off until we actually get the bonds issued.
Well, how many? That's a big time frame right there. I mean, so
Yeah.
some of them we don't need the money for up front, others we do.
You're going to need the money for all of them, but like design and that kind of stuff, we can cash flow that. We can't cash flow some of the other stuff.
Mr. Staggers?
Yes, I guess I'm a very patient person because I remember when this was first put in the CIP, the football fields. I think it was projected at 2011, wasn't it? 2012, something like that?
2011 for the first games to start.
So I guess my question is, it seems like we're in a real rush now. Why are we in a real rush?
Well, actually, we're, depend on
Some people want to try to move dirt here in 2009, and
the key on the time frame in which we can start play is not so much tied to the construction; it's tied more to the actual seasons of growth that we have on the fields. Our typical standard is to try to get at least 3 growing seasons, which is a spring and a fall and a spring, or any combination of those, so that you at least get 3 seasons. And so from a timing standpoint, that's what we're looking for in order to be able to have the turf established to the point where when we go out there and play, it's going to withhold the wear and tear that the players create on the fields themselves. So, I don't know that we're pushing it at all. I think we're really on the same time frame, or potentially even push back 6 months from where we were originally at, just just from the timing on the selling of the bonds.
Well, I guess, when we had it first put in the CIP, I thought the first money was to be spent in 2011.
No.
The cost of irrigation, how much is that going to cost?
I don't have the estimate right in front of me.
And also, too, the junior football league, do they have $1.48 million right now, or do we know when they're going to have it?
I don't believe they do, but I know their intention is to go out and raise those dollars to be able to do those improvements.
So what kind of deadline would we have for the $1.48 million? I mean, if this passes, we're going to put up 4.5, and when would we need the 1.48 million?
Well, in order to have the lights installed and have the additional support facilities that junior football would need to be able to conduct their program, that would need to be in place by, the start of the fall of 2011 or 12, depending on when the fields are ready for play.
You done, Kermit?
Is it time to ask about the hockey? Because
Sure.
Because I've heard that there's been an arrangement between Sanford and the youth hockey, and my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, is that they also want the city involved too, in terms of money.
We've not been approached about money for youth hockey.
Oh, okay.
Councilor Jamison.
Don, this is a huge gift from Sanford to establish this complex. Do you have any idea of the value of that?
Well, the initial projections was that the land itself was worth $3 million.
So if we were to start this somewhere else in town, we'd need additional $3 million to just start.
Yeah, unless we were to get another gift of some type, but yeah. For us to go out and buy this land, my understanding is it would cost us $3 million to do that. And that's one of the reason why the project hadn't progressed, is because we didn't have a location of that size to be able to accommodate not only the fields but the parking as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great gift. It's a great jumpstart to make this thing happen. But also share with me why it's important that we expand the number of fields to allow more teams to develop. Why is that important to the city of Sioux Falls?
Well, part of the reason is because as the city continues to grow, so too does the need for additional fields to accommodate additional teams. I think across the board in all of our sports programs, we're seeing growth in those programs, whether it be baseball, soccer, men's volleyball, men's basketball, women's volleyball. As those people continue to move to Sioux Falls, we have the need for additional space, whether it be gymnasiums or sports fields or whatever it might be. And the other thing I think we're seeing is that there are more and more program opportunities. Instead of one flag football program, we now have two flag football programs, and they're in different seasons. And so there's more and more wear and tear on those fields to be able to accommodate the number of players that want to play, and not to mention that it's good for our economy. There are people that come to town and buy gas and eat at our restaurants and those types of things, so it's obviously positive from that perspective too, because we are a regional service provider in most all of our programs, and especially this one where it really does draw in a lot of the smaller communities that don't have these programs.
Councilor Costello.
Don, the existing facility, how many fields are there now?
There are three regulation-sized fields, and then we have one short field that we still play games on, but it's not 100 yards in length.
And are they lit?
They are, yes.
So then, Don, would the city build a lot of this stuff, or would this go out for bids, and then contractors would be able to provide jobs and stimulus to the local economy?
No, we would contract this out just like we would on our typical projects. The other thing I might also add is that the timing on the grading and the sewer, it's kind of, we're still working with the county because they own the parcel in the northeast corner. If there's a way that we can grade and get that going, we'd like to see that happen, and so maybe we'll put a grading package out, and then we would come back and do the actual fine grading, the irrigation installation, the walkways, the parking in a future phase. We have lost a little time in delaying the issuance of these bonds, and so I just don't know with regard to the time frame how fast we can pull everything together, but I know our intention would be to move as quick as we could.
Councilor Costello.
Just as a point of clarification, and the sewer work itself or roads or any of that infrastructure is not a part of this. This is simply the cost of construction of the football fields themselves.
That's correct. Yeah, and the sewer is obviously recouped through user fees and plating fees. I don't know all that detail, but Mark could help us out, I'm sure.
Anything else of Don? Well, Don, thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I have one quick question.
Mr. Staggers.
Yeah, Bob. Taking a look here at the map of the Sanford Youth Sports Complex, we also, it has down there where the possible youth hockey complex will be, a youth tennis complex, a youth baseball complex. Am I to assume that in the future the city will be taking on all those projects?
The only commitment as far as this project goes is the junior football complex and the related parking that goes with it. The storm drainage, we've all got to provide those typical site development requirements, but there's no additional commitment on the city's behalf for anything beyond the junior football complex.
Councilor Knudsen.
I would just like to say in the last year that I'm on the city council, I sure hope that we can do more as a city to provide those facilities. I just think of our incredibly inadequate hockey facilities, and I hope the answer to Councilor Stager's question is absolutely yes.
I'd like to remind the council that Don and I were at the Sioux Falls Tennis Association's meeting, was it Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday last week, and they were excited about this too and like to be participants in this space. Mr. Staggers.
Yeah, I guess, my primary concern is the timing for all of this. I mean, this is really a poor time to ask for millions and millions of dollars when we're in the midst of a recession to, want to get new football fields and things like that. I mean, let's face it, the City of Sioux Falls has more important priorities than sports and things like that, especially during this time. Because we do have the citizens of Sioux Falls, many people suffering, and now we're talking about these kind of things. I mean, the timing is really very poor.
Well, I would just add to that, we're going to be out of this recession one of these days, and to stand still and submit to that fear is not to move forward. If you want to stand around and not do anything, then that's what will happen to this city. I, for one, would like to move forward with it. Councilor Knudsen.
Well, yes, and I realize this isn't a debate or anything right now, but I guess I would just like to say the flip side is the city is very responsible financially. And I just think that as we dilly-dally longer in these projects that we talk about and talk about and talk about, the price tag, while I've been on the city council, continues to go up. And also, I think these projects would, at the point we can make, decisions to move forward, I hope, is that they will provide many jobs. And I guess I keep hearing lots about the need for, stimulus and more jobs. And so I think it's actually an excellent time to get these 4 projects done.
Well, I guess if I could possibly reply to that. I mean, you can look at this from different points of view, that this might be an excellent time because we might get some good bids on these projects. But, try to put yourself in the shoes of some Sioux Falls citizens who have been laid off, we have an unemployment rate now of, about, 4.9%. When they read about what the Sioux Falls City Council is doing right now with these kind of bonds that are, these are not bonds dealing with streets or dealing with police or fire. People can understand that. These are just really, projects that, some people would like to have, but many other people are questioning why we should be doing it this time. So I think we ought to try to put ourselves in the shoes of many people in Sioux Falls who are now suffering.
Very good. Thank you, Don.
Elizabeth's up next.
Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Whaley from the Great Plains Zoo. And of course, you know that this bond does include improvements that stem from the zoo master plan. And we've already been making improvements over the last few years, and those improvements have really been paying off. Just to give you a little context, in the year 2005, our attendance was about 137,000. In the year 2007, it was about 220,000. So that's an increase in attendance of about 60%. People are coming back to the zoo, seeing what we have going on. And of course, as an attraction, that also has education and conservation and animal care as part of its mission. We need to make sure that we're providing good facilities for our visitors to see and also for our animals to live in. As part of that attendance number, that includes 26,000 kids that we teach in the four-state area through school groups, field trips, our Zoomobiles. So we're really seeing that education number rise, and we think that's very important because zoos are one of the last places that kids are going to connect with animals. You know, we're sort of losing that. When I was a kid, I had cousins with a farm. That isn't so anymore. And learning how to deal with animals and interrelate with animals helps develop kids to become who they are. So, of course, that's very important, and a zoo is a place to do that. So this implements actually 2 phases of our master plan that you approved in 2007. That includes our rhinoceros relocation, which is important for us to do first before we do any of the other phases because it's right in the oldest part of the zoo. It's where we need to do other improvements. And we also need to move those rhinoceros. They're in an old building that's about 45 years old. It's the oldest part of the zoo. It really has outlived its useful life. And so we need to get them into a good building, and along with a good building for animal care, we're going to provide a really amazing visitor experience for our guests. The second phase is our Gateway to the Zoo phase, which is part of the master plan. That does include some animal exhibits, a new monkey island, and in closing, our already popular flamingo aviary. But as importantly, it reshapes, revamps the front of the zoo so that we can process our members and our guests more effectively. On a very high visitation day, we have bottlenecks. It's very hard to get people through our doors. That's a good thing that we have so many visitors, but we want to make sure our visitor experience is really good for them. It also helps us capture more revenue. It helps us with the retail. It helps us with processing memberships at a separate place from admissions. We think it's important to run a good zoo, to do that Gateway to the Zoo. Your help reassures our funders that we're all partners in this together. The business community has signed on. They've given us the approval for the Chamber Appeal slot in 2010 to raise about $2.4 million from the business community. But also, we need to assure our individual donors, our foundations, all of the myriad of funders that we work with to support our zoo, that we're all partners in this. The good news is, across time, your support actually will leverage about $4 to $5 million in private fundraised money on these 2 projects. So that's really good news. We're actually supporting the city's assets with privately fundraised dollars. These projects, as slated in the master plan, also drive operational impacts in membership and admissions and other revenues that we have planned for as part of that master planning process. We did a lot of business modeling and financial forecasting, and so even our operations plans are based on rolling out these 2 phases in the timeframes that we have already agreed upon. Any questions?
Councilor Knudsen.
Well, and kind of a question or a comment, and then regarding the black rhinos too, I was thinking, our zoo is so incredibly active nationally as far as the endangered species is concerned, and the black rhino is one of those. And my understanding is a while back when a baby black rhino was born, at that point, we just don't have adequate space because the baby black rhino couldn't be near its dad at that point, and it was very, very crowded. Is that true?
We currently have 1 exercise yard and 1 barn. The barn was one that was constructed, I believe, for zebras. So zebras, rhinos, pretty big difference even in just the size of the animals. But also that 1 exercise yard makes a difference. That means that only 1 animal can be out at a time. That means the other animals have to stay in the barn. It's a very dark, old barn. And what we propose is having a couple of exhibit yards so these animals can get fresh air, get daylight all the time. Because of their family dynamics, often they can't be together, and so we need those 2 separate exhibit yards. But you're right, it's very important, and we are so blessed to have 2 of only 66 breeding eastern black rhinos in captivity. So we have a very rare and valuable population right here in Sioux Falls.
Mr. Staggers.
Yes, Elizabeth, you mentioned that you had increased attendance. Hey, congratulations. I think that's great.
Thanks.
Now, with increased attendance, does that mean we can begin to look at reducing the city subsidy?
Well, I think we need to look at improving and maintaining a really good zoo. And as you know, about 4 years ago, we really had substandard facilities, and it was well broadcast, well discussed news. We worked very hard to increase attendance and to make sure that we had the resources to run a really good zoo. And that's what we intend to do. I do appreciate the fact that we're all watching our management fee, and I can tell you from the Zoo Society Board perspective and from the management perspective, we've been very proud that we have kept that management fee increase on the city's portion to 0% across the last, I think, 4 years. In that time, we've grown our budget by about 17% just to get after deferred maintenance of the city's buildings and to move programs to where they needed to be for us to be a really good zoo, and I believe we are.
Our $1.3 million, isn't that really for operational expenses?
It is.
So, you're having more attendance, then we should be able to reduce that $1.3 million. Because right here, we're taking a look at a bond for CIP, which is something separate that doesn't have anything to do with attendance.
Well, CIP is very important, and we appreciate it very much. But we've used operating dollars across the last 4 years to really attack a lot of buildings that basically were falling down, and we've been pleased to renovate them, rehabilitate them, limp them along through operating. And if you come out to the zoo, I'd be glad to show you those renovated mini exhibits and those older buildings that we're going to have to live with for a while. And so we've put on a lot of new roofs. I think last year was the year that we replaced 4 furnaces, 4 big furnaces. So, when you think about 19 buildings, I think we're at 93,000 square feet of heated and cooled buildings. It's a lot of ground to cover on a 45-acre campus, and it takes a good piece of that operating budget just to do that.
What is the total operating budget right now?
We are at about $3.1 million. So the 1.3 management fee that we get from the city, I believe, is about 40, in the low 40s percent.
Other question, Councilor Knudsen.
Well, not a question, but, and I, realize that everyone has different words for different things and so forth, but I just still don't look at this as a subsidy issue. I think it's just really important for the public to realize, that the City of Sioux Falls owns the zoo. And it was only a few years ago that, we actually seriously considered divorcing ourselves. Unfortunately, we considered it seriously from the Zoological Society, and I think if, in fact, that divorce had happened, we would have found ourselves paying lots more than we are now to operate the zoo. So, again, I look at this as clearly a management fee for a very much city-owned facility.
Councilor Brown.
2 points on the CIP dollars. Past councils made the decision pay now or pay later, and they didn't pay now, so we're paying the price now for past decisions. Secondly, on the operational subsidy, if that's what you want to call it, by your increased attendance, we're subsidizing each visitor less because of the increased attendance. So I would say if you were doing it per visitor, you would be demanding a lot more.
Other questions of Elizabeth? Elizabeth, you did a nice job out there. I've been watching it, been going out there. It used to be a little bit dreary and a little shop worn, and you really pulled the pile forward on that. I'd like to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, the fourth component of our Quality of Life 2 bond is to talk about implementation of our River Greenway plan. And just as a little bit of a history, for those of you that were not on the City Council back in 2004, when we presented the new River Greenway Master Plan, which went through a huge amount of public input and a lot of public support. We had a number of meetings in the downtown area throughout the community, asking the public what they would like to see throughout the Greenway, and especially within the downtown portion. So back in 2004, when that plan was adopted by the City Council, I think there was a lot of public excitement and a lot of anticipation that we would begin implementation of those ideas. In 2006, we were approached by Zip City Partners to approve an option agreement. The Zip Feed Building property, and now we have the Sharapa Place building on that location. As part of that agreement, there was a commitment to purchase the adjacent railroad right-of-way and to eventually remove the old existing bridge and to construct a new pedestrian walkway that would meet our new floodplain requirements and connect both the west and the east sides of the Big Sioux River. In terms of partnerships, as I said, we do have a wonderful opportunity within the downtown area to continue with economic development opportunities. And there's partnerships going on between the public and private sector that have made a significant amount of change within the downtown, and particularly along the east bank of the Greenway, there's going to be even more opportunities for providing incentives for both public and private investment. And the Sharapa Place is the most glowing example of how these public-private partnerships can work. The construction of the first phase of Sharapa Place is a private investment of somewhere around $25 million. And that compares to the city's proposed investment along the east side of the Greenway of approximately $5 million. So that's a 5-to-1 ratio that we're being able to leverage, and that's just the first phase of private development. We know that with the Greenway improvements, there's going to be even more opportunity for private investment along the east side of the Big Sioux River. In addition to the 6th to 8th Street phase that we're talking about implementing with this bond issue, we're also talking to other private property owners to the north and to the south as far as great investment opportunities within the downtown area. So again, those public-private partnerships can be leveraged significantly by the investment along the Big Sioux Greenway. And then in terms of community priority, again, getting back to when the master plan was developed through the public process, we know that this is a very high priority for the community. And we've been working with Downtown Sioux Falls Development Committee on ideas for investment throughout the downtown, and they've identified this as a very high priority that we should begin implementation. The Sioux Falls Green Project has also earmarked the Greenway as a high priority. And we know that we're going to continue with various types of strategic planning and discussions about promoting more economic development, not only downtown but throughout the city of Sioux Falls, with the public and with the city council. And I'm sure that the Greenway is going to be one that will be mentioned as a very high priority for the community. The next slide shows you a concept plan of the area that we're trying to address with the quality of life bond. And this would be between 6th Street, which is on the left side of the map, and 8th Street, which is on the right side. This is a concept plan that we've been working with on our design ideas. And the idea of the bond issue would be to complete the improvements along the east side of the river from 6th to 8th Street. The new project cost that we are now recommending as part of the bond issue of $5 million is really based on three things. It's based on more current cost estimates of doing the entire scope of the project. It also includes the entire stretch from 6th to 8th Street. When we provided you with a proposal to do this last year through CIP, we were only going to be able to construct it from 6th Street down to the current railroad bridge. And so now we would like to complete the entire east side from 6th to 8th Street with the bond issue. And then also, as we've talked to the community about their priorities and gone to different meetings, again, we believe that there's a real public support to move forward with this as quickly as possible. If you want to go back to the previous slide, sorry. The Greenway improvements which are identified within this concept plan are the very first phase of implementation of the downtown portion of this project. And we know that eventually there's going to be another phases to the north and to the south that will be completed. It's important for us to move forward with this project in 2009. We have a number of steps. We need to remove the existing bridge. We need to design and construct a new pedestrian bridge. We need to complete all the permitting requirements, and we need to design and construct the greenway improvements themselves. The city has already purchased the bridge and adjacent right-of-way from the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad at a cost of $50,000. We've been working with Sharapa Place on incorporating their plans into the greenway improvements. We've been also working with Raven Industries on working on an agreement with them to convey the railroad right-of-way, which would be on the west side of the river, extending up to 6th Street, that they will be developing into a pedestrian walkway that will be available to the public to use. And they are going to be investing, Raven Industries, approximately $160,000 for this improvement. We also know that eventually, through the Sharapa Place Tax Increment Financing District, that the city will capture approximately $1.5 million of tax increment that we also plan to use in this area for greenway improvements. But we are not going to be able to use those funds until after the TIF bonds are paid back. So that's another future investment that's coming from the private sector that will benefit the public as part of this project. The slides show you when we did our public meetings and talked about what the greenway plan should include within the downtown area, the public came up with their top 10 uses and activities that they would like to see implemented as part of the downtown greenway plan. And these top 10 priorities were riverside dining, more pedestrian crossings, an amphitheater, a greater downtown river walk, sculpture, attractive bridges, outdoor markets and shopping opportunities, more trails and recreation corridors, and more of an urban river edge. And so that's the concept that we were trying to move forward as part of the quality of life bond. And I would just say that in summary, all the projects that we have described today are for the quality of life of Sioux Falls. And I know that in talking and looking at what's going on around the country, that there are cities that are making significant private and public investments into quality of life improvements, such as the libraries, the zoo, recreation facilities, and greenways. Because if we're going to keep growing, if we're going to keep wanting to attract investment into Sioux Falls, whether it's new employees or keeping existing employees here, we have to make these investments. And I think we can show you places around the country that have done this and that are going to be doing this in the future. And as the mayor I know has said in the past, if we don't make these investments, we're going to start falling behind. It's going to make it harder for us to attract new economic development into Sioux Falls. And there's a lot of people sitting here behind us today that are really supporting all these projects, and I know that are really anticipating that the City Council is going to support moving forward with this quality of life bond. Thank you.
Councilor Knudsen.
Well, you know, I clearly remember those days when we had those meetings about the River Greenway project, and I mean, they were some of the most interesting meetings I attended, and those huge, beautiful charts were just great, and I look forward to the day that our city looks a little bit more like San Antonio as far as the River Greenway. And then I think, you know, I guess I would just like to say that, you know, more than a couple of us, several of us, were on the City Council at the time in 2005 when we actually agreed with the plan, or the option plan for that land for with Mr. Scherschlick, and you know, there's a signed agreement on that, and I just think it would be well, I mean, I'm just very optimistic that we will go forward and with our legal obligation on this topic.
Mr. Staggers.
Yes, I have a number of questions, Mike. You mentioned there are three reasons why we're going from $3 million to $5 million. Yeah. One was because of current costs, better costs. Second one was we're going from 6 to 8. What is the third one?
The third one is that rather than splitting it up into more phases and doing the project over a longer time period, the community is telling me, let's move forward and get the entire thing done now from 6th to 8th Street and not do it in phases.
Okay, but you mentioned also somewhere about first phase. So we're not going to have any more phases or anything?
There would be additional phases north of 6th Street and south of 8th Street, yes.
Okay, so roughly we'll have 2 more phases then? Not,
Potentially, yes.
Potentially,
yes.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another question I have here is in regard to the agreement we have with, the ZIP option agreement. All of us on the council were well aware of this bridge across the Big Sioux River, but I guess I wasn't aware, and I'm not sure about my colleagues, about demolishing the existing railroad bridge. Was that actually in the agreement that the City of Sioux Falls would demolish the railroad bridge?
I don't remember that it said demolish, but I think what we have found since that time in working with FEMA and the Corps of Engineers is that the existing railroad bridge needs to be raised higher. And so that, I don't think we knew that back in 2006. We, at that time, were probably talking about maybe converting it into a pedestrian bridge or replacing it. But we don't have the choice now. We have to replace it.
I guess I didn't have that understanding that we have to demolish that bridge. My understanding was if we demolish the bridge, we'd get some little extra credit where we could do some more work on the greenway or something.
That's correct.
But we don't have to demolish it, though.
Well, right now, the bridge is a flood impediment, and if we don't remove it, we cannot do the rest of the greenway improvements.
Okay. But in the agreement, we don't have to demolish it. But as far as the cost now, if we go ahead, demolish the bridge, how much is that going to cost to demolish the bridge?
I'll have to get you a detailed cost estimate. I don't have that in front of me today.
How about the new bridge that we're planning to put across there then if we demolish the railroad bridge?
Yeah, that's going to be based on the design, which we don't even have yet, so...
We don't have any rough
I will get you the rough cost estimates that we have for all of the $5 million. I can provide that to the council.
Okay. I guess that's all
we'll
questions
provide
I
you
have.
with a more detailed estimate of our costs.
But are we going to get that before we actually vote on the bond issue?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Councilor Costello.
Mike, how does and maybe you'll have to provide it later too, but I'm curious, removing the bridge, and what are we doing on the River Greenway that we're going to impede because you're taking out an impediment.
Right.
So you're kind of implied that we're going to be adding an impediment.
Yes.
What's that?
If we could go back to that concept slide. Go to the next one. There we go. On the east side of the river, all of the proposed greenway improvements are in what we call the floodway and the floodplain. And so in order for us to be able to encroach into that area, we have to find some credits. And the way that we find those credits through FEMA and the Corps is by removing the existing railroad bridge.
So would we actually be extending the greenway into the river, or are you just saying it already
In
is?
some places, we potentially would be, such as the amphitheater. Some of those structures could potentially go farther into the river than the current shoreline, yes.
In the River Greenway plan, how far back does that go? How long have we been working on it?
It was adopted in 2004.
In 2004?
Yes.
Okay. This particular version?
Yes.
And then I just have a couple of questions. I'm not sure if this is who to direct this to, but regarding this agreement, to acquire and deed railroad right-of-way to the owners no later than January 1st, 2007. Why hasn't that been done?
It took us 3 years to negotiate with the Burlington Northern to acquire the bridge.
And is there anything, I mean, that's a no-brainer at this point?
Yes,
I mean, it doesn't really going to cost us any money, and we just got to get it done?
Right, we've already purchased the bridge in the right-of-way for $50,000, so we're in the process of making those conveyances now.
And is that kind of like a split, like with a road? Raven would get half, and Sharapa gets the other half, or how does that?
Raven will acquire the right-of-way on the west side of the river, and Sharapa on the east side of the river.
Okay.
Councilor?
I'm sorry. The other question I have is kind of along the original one, is that apparently the document dates back to 2005, and part of the River Greenway to develop and construct it, which it sounds like the plans go back to 2004, was that it was to complete it in September of 2008. And I'm curious why that wasn't done.
It was done because of the time it took to acquire the right-of-way, the bridge.
No, not the, maybe that's a part of it, but the bridge stuff says it was no later than January 1st of 2007. And then to construct the River Greenway, it says it was no later than September 1st, 2008.
Yes, but it all has to follow the steps of sequence to do the bridge first and then the Greenway. So everything is just taking longer than originally anticipated, except the private investment.
Councilor Anderson.
Okay, Mike, please refresh my memory here. The tax increment zone there, that expires in what year?
That doesn't expire for probably, I would say, 10 more years when those bonds will be paid back.
Okay, and you said you were working on an agreement with Ravens right now?
Yes.
At what point in time do you expect that to be completed?
Very soon.
Okay.
Yep.
And when is Ravens, or when are we going to start the west side development then?
Raven indicated that they will be starting their walkway project very soon. Their $160,000 investment.
Okay, and then looking at this agreement also, I still got a couple questions on this. You know, you have it listed 1, 2, 3 here, which the first two have a date when they should be completed. But the third one here, as far as constructing the walkway bridge, does not have a date when it should be completed. Now, do you have something else that you could tell us on that, or?
I don't know that we specifically put a date in there at the time. I'll have to go back and look at it again to see.
So we might have a little flexibility in there.
Well, we can't do the Greenway improvements unless we do the bridge first. That's the message I'm trying to convey today. We can't delay the bridge and still do the Greenway.
I thought you could take the bridge out, then you create your credit, don't you? And I think what Kenny's talking about replacing the walkway.
Right. So I'm not really arguing the point of taking the bridge out.
Right.
As I've said before on that, I believe we need to take that bridge out. But after we do that, you know, I'm looking at we create the River Greenway, but we don't have a deadline on actually installing that bridge.
I think the original arrangement was that the bridge would be done, but I'll have to go back and look at that just to confirm it, yes.
Okay.
I think that was indicated that would be done as part of the Greenway improvements, is to do the bridge. But I'll go back and look at that again.
I'd like to see that.
Sure.
Mr. Bennigan.
Mike, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, but is there any ties between the Shoneman development and the current Greenway development and any future phases of the Greenway into that time frame of when that will be completed?
Yes, we have been talking to the property owners and other representatives of the Shoneman site, and all of their presentations, all of their concept plans have incorporated our downtown Greenway master plan into their ideas. So what we expect will happen is when we come forward with a TIF district proposal for the Shoneman site, that would include the Greenway portion south of 8th Street.
That was my next question.
Yes. Yeah. As well as north in the future with Sioux Steel and other development like that along the shoreline.
Mr. Staggers.
Yeah, Mike, just to clarify, for $5 million, we're going to put in a pedestrian bridge And then we're also going to do the greenway on the east side of the river between 6th and 8th, and that's for $5 million.
Yes.
Okay.
And that cost estimate, as I said, I'll get that to you. It also includes some design and other costs that would be associated with the project.
Mr. Costello.
We're talking about $5 million between 6th and 8th Street on the east side. So it's roughly $2.5 million a block, and we're going to continue this north and south. Would you anticipate that the development cost is going to continue to be that high to
I think
develop?
this will be the most, I would say this will be the highest cost area that we're doing now, just based again on the master plan with the type of improvements that are proposed along the shoreline.
Could you send us that master plan too somehow in a
Sure.
email?
Yeah. This is what it looks like, but we'll get that to you.
Or a hard copy?
Okay.
Councilor Knudsen.
Well, and just a reminder that in that memo that we received today from Mr. Schuschlik is that, again, the third item it says, per our joint written option to purchase article number 113 consideration. We were just directed to 3 important items. And the third one says, construct a walking bridge connecting the walking paths concurrent to construction of the greenway.
Mr. Anderson.
Mike, on the west side of this plan here, I guess, could you give us a little ideal here, just to the east of the Ravens building there, how they're going to continue a path there? There's not a whole lot of room.
Right. One of the things that we've talked about is constructing a trail that would actually extend above the river bank itself. And so that's going to be a design issue that we still have to work out. That would be cantilevered out from the existing property line. And this west side is what we anticipate we would use the tax increment financing for the implementation in the future.
And then, I guess, just to continue on, the river's edge there behind River Tower and everything, is that going to be redone? And is that
Again,
the city's responsibility there also?
That's a concept plan that we hope to eventually work with the owner of that property to implement with them. There's some potential future plans for private improvements on that property as well that we might be able to utilize as leverage to make some of the greenway improvements along that area as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mike?
All right.
Very good.
Thank
Mike,
you.
do you have one more speaker for us tonight?
What we're going to do, Jessica Cameron from PFM is going to come and discuss with you the finances of this project. It'll be on the quality of life bonds where you see the $18.5 million. Jessica?
Good evening. Just to run through kind of the use of proceeds again, you've got $4.3 million in for the West Side Library, $5 million for the River Greenway improvements, $4.2 for the youth sports complex, and then $2.5 million for the Zoo Master Plan improvements. That's $16 million. To get up to the $18.5 million number, we've got about $1.1 million in there for capitalized interest, which helps to pay for interest costs until it actually comes onto the CIP. And then there's $1.4 million of contingency in case either interest rates go up and capitalized interest increases or project costs go up. If the $1.4 million is not needed, it will either not be issued or those amounts would go to pay for debt service. So it's only counts if it's needed. We used some brief assumptions when we were looking at this. We included flood control project. Mr. Cotter was able to get some more refined numbers today, bringing down the project cost amount from $27 million down to $25 million. So those numbers are a little bit high for the time being. And then we also plugged in numbers sort of to your existing debt for the $18.5 million for the Quality of Life 2 project. We're looking at a 20-year term for the bonds. The first principal would be payable in 2011, and interest is capitalized through 2010. Moving on to the next page. This is a slide you've seen before with some slight differences. Kind of the orangish red area is your existing debt that carries the second penny pledge. The purple would be the addition of the debt related to the flood control project, and then the blue is for the Quality of Life 2. You can see that the second penny collections for last year were over $43 million, and the dashed line, the dashed green line, is kind of your policy coverage target. That would be the 2-to-1, where you want 2 times the collections as to debt service. The next slide, what this really shows, and we've talked about this before, you pledge the second penny to pay debt that you actually pay from other sources of funds, such as the Lewis and Clark project that comes from water revenues. So really, it is that yellowish section is the current debt that is paid from your existing sales and use tax from the second penny pledge. And here again, you see that the blue is the flood control project and the green is the Quality of Life 2 project. You will notice that by the time the flood control project, you actually begin to pay for that, your debt service will have actually declined, and so that would not be an increase at all to the amount of sales tax dollars going to pay for debt service. The other thing to note here is that I did not include any projections for payments from the Corps to pay for the project. While they have not agreed to front pay it, the expectation is that they would continue to pay it as they have been paying it, $1.5 to $2.5 million a year. So if you look at the next slide, and this is, I know, a lot of little tiny numbers, but the important things to note are we're looking at, for the entire flood control project, this includes both the Corps piece and the city piece, the annual debt service coming on in 2011 is about $2.6 million, and the Quality of Life 2 project is about $1.6 million. If you get $2 million from the Corps, that is more than enough to offset the debt service associated with the Quality of Life 2 bonds. Down at the bottom, you can see that in 2009, after all debt service is paid for the second penny, assuming no growth, again, in your sales tax projections, you would net out $33.9 million of funds that are available for other projects and other things. In 2010, that amount goes up to $34.4 million. If you were to approve the Quality of Life 2 bond project, that amount does go down to $32.3 million. But if the Corps pays the $2 million, as they have on average over the past 5 years, you actually would be, again, at $34.3 million going forward. So I know there's a lot of concerns about using additional second penny monies to pay for debt service. Realistically, looking at both of these two issues and the payments that the Corps has been given and the debt service that you have coming off, you would not expect to see that you would actually be increasing the amount of debt service that you are paying from the second penny pledge.
Questions? Councilor Costello.
I hate to put any more work on you, but your charts, the one that's orange and the one that's yellow,
Yep.
Would it be possible to get that backdated a few years?
Yes.
Just where we were at, 2000 through?
Yes.
That now?
I can definitely do that.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Let me write that in my notes.
Yes, on your charts and everything, of course, you're making a number of assumptions. What interest rate are you assuming?
The assumed interest rate for the 20-year term would have an all-in TIC of slightly less than, or, I'm sorry, not an all-in TIC, a TIC of slightly less than 4.5%.
Okay, 0.55. And then, can you give us the total cost then with interest at 4.5% for the quality of life bonds and also for the levies?
The total debt to be paid
Yeah, total
for
amount
the
of money.
entire term?
Yes.
For the quality of life, using those assumptions, which I would say are conservative, and assuming that the entire $18.5 million is issued, you would be looking at net debt service of less than $29 million, and that is over a 20-year term. Again, for the flood control project, the amount is more in the range of about $47 million, but that is not, well, actually, no, I take that down. The amount is closer to $43 million. I was thinking about the $2 million in my original numbers that Mark's refined numbers took out. But once, assuming that the Corps pays for their $11+ million piece of the project, it would be closer to $22.5 million over the 20-year term for the flood control projects.
Other questions for Jessica? Mr. Costello.
On those two charts you're going to send us,
Yes.
your chart shows us the second penny sales tax receipts, I presume, as it is estimated in 2009 and with the 2-to-1 debt ratio coverage, but obviously
Yes.
that number is going to change as time goes on.
That is correct.
Can you get the historical second penny sales tax rates for that same time frame that we talked about earlier?
Yes.
And I have one other question. Is the City of Sioux Falls still at risk of paying a higher interest rate related to having to negotiate our bonds versus being able to bid our bonds because of the unknown factors related to the initiative to repeal the second penny, or down to that 1/10, or to reduce it down that 1/10%?
We still do have, I mean, the thing is, the hair still exists, going back to our comments on that before. The story still exists, because even though the 6-month time frame has ended, there have been statements that they will not end the initiative. In that case, we would expect that the bonds would likely need to be negotiated. With the flood control projects coming first, the sale of those will give us a good idea as to whether or not the market is seeing sort of any impact on that. And I would say that, in the current market, you can effectively do a negotiated sale. You can't promise that it's the same bids that you're going to get on a competitive sale, but part of the reason why I work with you is to make sure that you pay as little as possible.
Very good. Anything else? Very good. Then thank you, Jeff. Councilor Benega.
I actually have a question for Gene, if you have just a second. To be blunt, over the last couple of weeks, I've run into a number of people who have gotten information that I think has been sensationalized or incorrect about the indebtedness of the community. Can you give us a chart or some graphs at some point in the near future about the indebtedness of the community that's being paid for by fees versus what's being paid for by sales tax?
Oh, yeah, we can do that.
I think that's extremely important, because when people decide to criticize us for those numbers when they are grossly misunderstood, is important for us to give them a simple document to show them on what's actually being paid for through fees and what's being paid for by the second penny sales tax. And if we could go back on that, that would be great also.
Can you give me just a short minute for the consultation? Okay, actually, it's on the graph, the second one down here, the gray line. That gray line is the amount that is being paid by other sources than the sales tax. The bottom graph on your page.
I would like to see that separated, though, if you know what I mean, so that we can make that very clear to people who ask those questions or don't understand bonding or indebtedness, that those are two separate issues versus combining them into one large graph that shows that this is our total indebtedness. If you need to put them together at some point, that's fine, but I think it's important that they be individualized so people understand the difference between, again, fees and taxes.
We can do that.
You break them up in funds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the issue is different funds and that kind of stuff.
Councilor Costello. Go ahead, Gene. Sorry. Councilor Costello.
Gene, I'm just wondering, a couple of these projects too, particularly the youth sports complex and the zoo, have components of fundraising donations coming in. What happens if they fall short of their dollars?
Well, the money's not going to get spent. It'll be held there in funds for, we can hold it, I think, for 24 months. Maybe it's 36 months in some cases. But it would be held until the agreements are met, whatever agreements that are out there.
But aren't we going to be starting these projects? Maybe their fundraising is already ongoing. But I was under the assumption that we were going to start these projects prior to that happening.
Yeah, the stance we've had historically when we've had private contributions, for example, the Elman Foundation, obviously that wasn't a fund drive, so to speak, but we always ask for those dollars ahead of any bidding that we do for these projects. Now realize that on the junior football aspect of it, those are improvements that come in after we do grading and seeding because they're what I'll call above ground improvements, lights, buildings. Those things can be installed separately and would typically have an agreement that would memorialize how that all gets put together. And in the case of the zoo, typically what we've done is, fundraising would happen to fall short. We would right-size that project, I think, to be able to make sure that there's that 50-50 match. And so that would be our stance, and that's what we've talked about historically.
Right-sizing that project so just to lower to match what was raised?
Yeah, and to phase that in so that, if we didn't have enough dollars to be able to do the entire project, that if, for example, they raised $2 million instead of the entire $2.5 million, that we would do a $4 million project instead of a $5 million project.
And that's, okay, so I understand that aspect, but on the sports complex, aren't the lights in the buildings, which I presume would be restrooms or?
Yeah, they have equipment storage needs for all the helmets and gear and everything for all the pads and uniforms.
Isn't that going to make kind of an integral component of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. They'll need to be out hitting the streets to be able to raise those dollars so that by 2011, when we start play, those buildings and those lights are installed. And so that'll be part of our agreement with Sanford and with South Dakota Junior Football, that's their commitment and that's their portion of that project. Because we'll have an agreement, we're working on a memorandum of understanding that lays all that out, how that works.
Mr. Staggers.
Yeah, Don, so we don't actually have an agreement right now, huh?
We're currently in the process of working on that agreement. We have been for a few months now, and so we're getting very close. We've got a good outline of what that will look like, and we're confident that we'll get that done here shortly.
You mentioned Sanford. So is Sanford going to be taking part in this agreement too, since they gave us the land, or what?
Yes. That they would gift the land, and that we would agree to build the improvements as per the concept plan that we finally come up with.
Oh. So we don't actually have the land right now, huh?
Not at this point.
Okay.
The land is not transferred at this point.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson.
I don't know if it's going to be Mark or who will answer the question. In the CIP, what do we have earmarked for roadways with that sewer coming in? Don't we have to have a road coming into this area, and when is that going to be constructed?
For the junior football complex?
Yes.
That's Benson Road, and that just with the functionality between Westport and the levee system, that's going to be a collector street, and the adjoining property owners pay for that. And so our thoughts are that we will do that through a bond anticipation note like we did about 7 local and collector streets last year, of which next week we bring those special assessments forward. And so that primarily Benson will be done with a bond anticipation note, and the street that goes to the north that will connect to the fields will be a city cost, and Public Works and Parks is budgeting for that.
And that'll also include the parking lot too, then? Will all be budgeted in, because we're constructing the parking lot too, correct?
Yeah, site improvements would be, I'll let Don speak to the site improvements, but specifically for the roads, if it is frontage property for city, that'll come out of sales tax dollars. And we have a joint project in the CIP.
Yeah, that's correct. The parking lot is part of the $4.2 million budget.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Gene? Gene, have you anything else for us?
The only thing I wanted to do was just do a little wrap-up here to talk about the points that have been made here. This is indeed a propitious time to go about an activity like this. There was an article, I think maybe some of you have seen it in USA Today, that other cities are taking advantage of the low interest rates and the favorable construction rates that are getting. We have been, as a city so far this year, we've been experiencing very good results in our bids. It seems to be a good time to be doing that. Interest rates are low. We don't know how long they're going to stay there. I think most people would agree that inflation is indeed something to be concerned about 12, 18, 24 months out, and this is indeed a good time to, from an investment standpoint, to be doing this. Give you, we talk a little bit about, get some sense of maybe something people can relate to at home. Right now, the CIP that is pledged towards payments is about 30%, not CIP, I'm sorry, the debt service issue number is about 30%, or actually about 25% of the total CIP, 1 penny collected every year. In your personal residence, when you get a mortgage for your house, 30% for something called shelter, which includes taxes, mortgage payment, heating, cooling, anything of that nature, is the thumbnail is about 30%. So we're actually underneath, we're spending less here in our personal residence than we would if we were actually doing it for our own house. So keep it in mind, it's a big number, but in the scheme of things, it's a very doable kind of number. The good things about this, we've got some commitments out there. Some, if nothing else, some of them are handshake agreements. This will allow us to keep those agreements that we've made with some of our partners as far as funding projects by contribution. It keeps the city moving forward. And I think that is one of the key things that we want to be watching out very carefully for at this, when we are in an economic climate like we are in. We need to keep moving forward. This will indeed, albeit maybe not like the federal government, but it does indeed give us some really good stimulus in our city, because there will be a lot of construction going on under these projects. We need to keep moving forward on this thing cautiously, and what that will do is give the citizens of the city confidence that we are indeed acting in a reasonable and rational manner, and one that is good for the city and for the citizens as a whole. And altogether, $16 million worth of construction projects will leverage $7 million in private contributions. And that seems to be a pretty good ratio and a pretty good investment, as a matter of fact, when you're doing it. So with that.
Mr. Costello.
Gene, could you provide us the historical percentages regarding the percent of the second penny sales tax receipts that are spent on debt?
Sure. You bet.
Any other questions, Gene?
We are done.
Very good. Thank you, Gene. And thank you all the presenters who came down here today to give us that information. We appreciate it. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Mr. Staggers.
Yes. This is something you're very familiar with, Bob. In regard to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, not being allowed to use the I-90 rest area for, when we have the bikers come in for Sturgis, CVBs out there, welcoming them and creating a good image for South Dakota and also creating a good image for Sioux Falls. Well, the Department of Transportation said they can't do it this year. And in emails with the Department of Transportation, I did get an email here the other day trying to explain the reasons why the CVB cannot do this. And let me just mention the 3 reasons they've given. First of all, congestion. Some events cause major congestion, which hinder pedestrian traffic and traffic flow. Second, liability. While we had a hold harmless clause in the permit, this does not eliminate total liability to the state. And then thirdly, compliance. Some organizations do not comply with the rules. Now, the CVB has been out there for many, many years. I asked Terry Ellis how many years they've been out there, and she doesn't know for sure, maybe 15 or more years. And it's always been such a good thing, once again, for the state and also for the city. And what we have here is really a bureaucratic response as to why they're not allowing the CVB to do this. And I'm just asking my colleagues on the council here whether we should maybe pursue this further with a resolution or whatever the case might be. But I think it would be important for us to try to help them out, to allow the CVB to be out there as usual.
Mr. Staggers, you and I agree on this issue wholeheartedly, and I think that the state has failed to take into account the difference between somebody being out there for the commerce and the good of the state as opposed to what would be a religious or a political view. I'm not in favor of religious or political views being pandered at the rest stops, but if we've got commerce and we're promoting tourism, I think it's appropriate and right. And yes, Mr. Staggers, I'd certainly be interested in working with you on that for whatever end we can achieve.
Okay.
Anybody else?
So maybe we can talk among ourselves, maybe getting a resolution, and I'll continue to try to contact other people in the DOT.
I'd like to do that, Mr. Staggers. Anything else for the good of the order? Very good, then. We, in the interest of moving ahead here, we have a fiscal meeting right after this, so there's going to be no executive session today, even though everybody's here, so we will stand adjourned. See everybody at 7 o'clock.